درود به مردم شریف ایران. من شهریار افشار هستم، میزبان شما در برنامه Politics 365. امروز ما یه سفیر بازنشسته به برنامه پیوسته، خانم جینا ابرکامبی وینستنلی. ایشون یک کارشناس خاورمیانه و مدیر میدل ایست پالیسی کانسل هستند در واشنگتن دی سی، یه مؤسسه غیر انتفاعی که کارهای ریسرچ و بی‌طرف هستن این گروه و کارهای ریسرچ تا اونجایی که در مورد خاورمیانه انجام میدن. ما میخواستیم ایشون رو دعوت کنیم به برنامه که یه ذره از کارهای میدل ایست پالیسی کانسل بیشتر آشنایی پیدا کنیم و شاید هم چند تا سوال کنیم در مورد گازا و نقش ایران در خاورمیانه. بقیه برنامه به انگلیسی شد. Ambassador, welcome to Politics 365. Thank you for bearing with me as I'm just introducing you in Farsi. It's kind of the fun thing, right? You hear a foreign language and you hear your name in the middle of it. I wonder what they're saying about me. But it's all good
I heard
stuff.
Safira, so
yeah, okay, good.
Yeah.
So you have an ear for Middle Eastern languages, so I'm sure in your very distinguished career as a diplomat, U.S. Foreign Service, and so many different things. If you could just tell us a little bit about your background and how you became interested in the field that you pursued all your life, and what really drives you. You know, I always fascinated with the role that diplomats play in the world. I feel we don't focus enough on what diplomats are doing and how much peace building is really ingrained in the psychology of diplomats. So I'm really just want to learn about you personally, how you embarked on this path, and what brought you to the Middle East Policy Council.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. It's a privilege to be here and have this conversation. I come from a family of public servants. It's what we all do. I'm the only child of 4 children who did not go into the military, so they kind of, snicker at me being a diplomat. But Peace Corps as between undergraduate and graduate school, and then the diplomatic corps. Also, I was a presidential management fellow for a short period before my security clearance got passed through for the State Department. I did Peace Corps in the Sultanate of Oman, not far from Iran. And I was an undergraduate at Tel Aviv University. So both of those things gave me a wide perspective, shall we say, on the region and some of the challenges facing people in the region and U.S. relations with countries in the region. The vast majority of my career has been in the Middle East, from starting off in Baghdad as a consular officer running the section and supporting American citizens and issuing visas, all the way through to being ambassador in Southern Europe in Malta. While part of the EU, it's very close to Tunisia and Morocco and Libya. And so there was a lot of North African transit, and of course we supported our mission from Libya in Malta after the overthrow of Gaddafi. So Middle East policy, obviously Arab-Israeli conflict has been a core part of many of the issues that circle around it, but I also served as the first woman to lead a diplomatic mission in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So I've been in a very conservative part of the world. And again, those relationships from Israel, Palestine, North Africa, and the Gulf. So I've done the Levant, I've done all 3 sections there. The only country I haven't been to in the Middle East is Iran. I'm hoping in my lifetime that we get our bilateral relationship to a point where I can fix that, I can correct that.
I hope so too. You mentioned that, since you mentioned that being the first woman into Saudi Arabia as leading a diplomatic mission, how did you find that experience? Because by comparison, as you may know, pre-Islamic Republic, Iran had many women in diplomatic roles to the United Nations, and it was really a leader in women's rights pre-1979. And of course, now we've gone back 1,000 years. So I'm just curious how you found that experience.
Yes, well, I was certainly cognizant of the fact that in some ways, women had greater freedom in Iran than they did in Saudi Arabia. So You remember, when I was there, women could not drive automobiles. They could not travel without the consent of their father, their brother, or their son, as the case may be. Women could not go into courts, um, not only to represent others as attorneys, but to go in even as a client. It allowed a wide range of abuses against women without having these basic rights. Not only driving was the visible one, but there were so many others. And from my perspective, access to the judicial system was the most important one. That challenge of, if a marriage dissolved, that if the husband did not give permission for the children to go to school, that he could hold a wife, frankly, hostage, the children hostage, for however he wanted that divorce to be adjudicated. So I saw a lot of things like that, and also saw some incredibly capable, dynamic women, whether it was in the women's portion of the Chamber of Commerce, a lot of entrepreneurial spirit among women, or in the women's colleges. While I was there, one of the colleges that the embassy had a very close connection with was starting an engineering degree for women. This has progressed to a great extent in the last 20 years. So when I was in Saudi Arabia in the last 5 years, I've made several trips to see the changes, the visible ones, which are women in public spaces, which did not happen while I was there. I was the first woman in many public spaces in Saudi Arabia where women had not been, to seeing women driving. I had a meeting at the Ministry of Education last November, and going back to my hotel, one of the officials, female, said, "I can give you a ride." And I said, "I will take that ride." This will be the first time that I've been in a car with a woman driving in Saudi Arabia. So
Wow.
I very much enjoyed it.
Right. It's so amazing, the contrast between Saudi Arabia and Iran, especially on women's
Mm,
rights. Here we
yes.
have Saudi Arabia, as you put it, women couldn't drive, they couldn't do this. And of course, in Iran, the big upheaval and the most recent uprising was all based around the hijab. But women could drive and they have various different business roles, and as you know, but still constrained, as you legally under Sharia law, it's
Indeed.
just very frustrating to watch the potential of Iranian women who have led this 2022 revolution, if you can call it that, as maybe something that a lot of Iranians are very proud of. That the strength of, as you put it, the entrepreneurial spirit of women in Saudi Arabia, and the strength and the resolve and the resilience of the Iranian women. As you watched that, let me switch to Iranian women for a second, and then we'll come back to the Middle East. As you watched the women life freedom movement in Iran, what were your, what were you thinking? Is it a sense of pride, fear, concern, happiness
Oh
that
gosh.
women are standing up?
Frustration was probably the first thing. I don't have the personal ties to Iran. As a woman, deep frustration wherever I am in the world, including our own country. Let's be honest here.
Right, right.
When any person on a demographic basis is held back from fulfilling their potential, it is a waste to the nation. And so, one of those things, when you see the constraints on Iranian women, when you know the past and their ability to contribute, um, deep frustration and a recognition that the nation as a whole is suffering, is losing out. Um, Pride, because they were standing up for themselves. It's very difficult. Such things always are. And we have too many examples around the world of revolutions pushing and not reaching where we hope they will reach in the short term. And so it takes a great deal of courage not to give up, to keep moving forward for what you believe is right, for that ability to truly meet your potential, to support your nation as everybody wants to do, recognizing the powerhouse that is Iran, even as it limps along under the current leadership, my gosh, if all of Iranians were able to be unleashed, to fulfill that entrepreneurial spirit, the public service, the role on the international stage, that intellect, heritage, knowledge, all of the things that are part of Iranian history should naturally lead to it's a waste. So there's a great deal of frustration. I have a great deal of frustration about our bilateral relationship. As a diplomat, we should be able to figure this out and move beyond the many, many missteps that have happened from Iran's side with regard to the United States and from the United States side with regard to Iran.
Right.
Many Americans don't realize that it's not just Iran's fault that there is a bad relationship between the two nations. It takes two to make peace, and it takes two to mess up bilateral relationships. Anybody in a marriage knows that.
Right, right. Well, that's a whole different podcast right there.
There we
go. You know, since you mentioned that the rapprochement or any kind of a re-engagement or diplomacy with Iran, as you know, the diaspora is very much against engaging the Islamic Republic. They feel that by engaging them, we're empowering their abusive, oppressive regime. But obviously, you're speaking as a diplomat, and I would like maybe for you to comment on how does a democracy like America reconcile or begin to approach a autocracy or theocracy where women's rights and human rights are not respected to the extent that we like to think we respect them in our country. So how do you reconcile that engagement as a better option than isolation?
Well, I'll quote Yasser Arafat: "You don't make peace with your friends," number one. And the United States has managed to engage with autocracies and theocracies forever, and we will continue to do so. How are we engaging with Russia or China or Saudi Arabia, for that matter? We do. If you are not communicating, then there's no hope. I'm a diplomat. I believe in communicating and in finding a way, and good diplomats will do that. There is, I'll leave it there.
Right.
I have lots of arguments with my siblings,
Right.
who are military officers, and we've got to have a strong military. We've got to be out there, and so on and so forth. All of that may be true, but it should be the last resort. And I am certain, my personal belief, my professional belief, is that there is a lot of progress to be made without resorting to military means. That's right. Just,
so yeah. You're right. In any conflict or a difficult relationship, you have a military option. Let's say that's the last resort. There's a diplomatic option. But of course, what we typically, as you know, resort to in this country is sanctions and isolation as the first reaction. And then if that doesn't work after 45 years, I don't know what does.
We have Cuba, we have Iran.
Right. They're in a, yeah. So you're right. That's a whole different thing. But let me, in the 4 or 5 minutes we have, let's focus back on the Middle East Policy Council and your work. What have you done? What has the council done in the past, especially since October 7, but really in the past couple of years? And then what do you hope to achieve in the coming years?
Well, the council's been around for over 40 years, and we focus on educating, much like you're doing with this wonderful podcast. We've got two ends of the spectrum insofar as we focus on members of Congress, because they're legislating, they're making laws. They need to be educated and informed. So we give conferences on Capitol Hill. We cover all countries of the Middle East. So the last few that we've done, I've only been with the council as president for 8 months now. So the two that we've done under my watch include artificial intelligence in the Middle East, the challenges, opportunities, and information in wartime. Gaza as a case study are the two that we've done focused on Capitol Hill. Give them information. But we also have a website, Teach Mideast, that focuses on providing information for high school. We want to get to students, young people, to inform them in an unbiased fashion so that they can approach the Middle East with an open mind and a recognition of the challenges and the similarities, the shared human values that we all share, and an appreciation of the cultural differences, which are exciting, something that should entice people to reach out, to want to know more, to visit, to experience. And then, of course, we have a journal, a scholarly journal. People will be able to find brilliantly written articles on any aspect of the bilateral relationships with countries in the Middle East, obviously including Iran. There are many over the years, and give a platform for experts there. We're starting a virtual exchange program with students from the Middle East and from American high schools. Again, we're trying to get to the younger group before they make up their mind with all the biases that we get from our usual sources of information. So those are the things we've done historically, of course, since October 7th. In addition to focusing on some of the challenges, the history of the conflict, we're putting up, if it's not up there already, a definition. What is the difference between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism? It's not polemical by any stretch of the imagination, but we want to be able, particularly if you're a teacher, you can go to our website and find some quick, easily digestible information about the topical issues that your students are asking about, or you might be discussing over the family dinner table. So we've got that out there as well. And so we've also begun to do a lot of press and media because people are trying to understand what in the world has caused this terrible, terrible conflict. It's one of longstanding, and it is important to know, in spite of the heinous attack on October 7th by Hamas, this conflict did not begin October 7th. There is a reason that people do unreasonable.
Ambassador, you mentioned anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism. In this country, at least in America, we're having a big conversation. Sometimes people feel if they are saying something against what the government of Israel is doing, they get accused of being anti-Semitic, right? And of course, prior to October 7, even now, many Jews all over the world, Israelis, people of all different, connections to Israel, are vehemently opposed to what the government of Israel was doing before October 7, and especially now. So help us in the couple of minutes we have left to understand that diversity, that confusing dynamic, because we'd like to criticize our government officials. That's kind of what makes us America, right? But we also simply want to make sure we don't run afoul of any or become victims of some anti-Semitic rhetoric, because that's not the point. The point is being against, right? So how would you characterize it?
Well said. And of course, the distinction is criticism of a government cannot be anti-Semitic. It is criticism of Israel is the same criticism we might have with Iran or Venezuela or the UK, as they talk about sending people to Rwanda, for goodness sakes. Right. That is absolutely required. It is not only acceptable, it is required. And we have got to ensure that our policies keep America as the primary beneficiary. We should be managing foreign policies that are good for the United States. Anti-Semitism, of course, is hatred of Jews because of their religious and cultural background, and that indeed is unacceptable, the same way racism is unacceptable, or sexism, or all the other isms. And there is a distinction between being Israeli, and certainly a part of the Israeli government, and being Jewish in America or any other nation in the world. Very distinctive, but we must ensure that we don't fall into confusing being Jewish versus being Israeli, and or holding to account Jews outside of Israel for Israel's actions because they're American or
Right.
English or Mexican or whatever it is that they come from.
Right.
So we have to watch our language. We have to watch our language, but we also cannot see the field and be afraid to criticize Israel. That is our right as Americans and frankly Israelis.
Right,
You can
right.
see some of the most pointed criticism of the government. It comes from Israel
Right.
itself.
And they're the most best positioned to criticize their government, right? Ambassador Gina Abercrombie-Winstanley, thank you so much for joining us. We learned so much. We could talk all day long about all the different aspects from married life to diplomacy and the Middle East, and seems to
There's a connection.
have a lot in common. There's a lot in common there, right? Conflicts, right? Thank you so much. We will check back in with you often. I think the Middle East Policy Council is doing excellent work, and we're so grateful for your time and your team's work in educating Congress. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, sir. My privilege.